Hello again, lovely people.
Safety vlogs.
A couple of weeks ago, I posted a video that was a review of a little tiny comic that I bought at Thought Bubble called I Love This Part by Tilly Walden. The lovely people at Avery Hill Publishers saw my video and then contacted me and offered to send me some other things that I could read and potentially review if I liked them. So obviously I was like, yes, please send me things. I will read all of them. Thank you. You're very nice people. I tried to sound a little bit more professional, but now that I'm admitting this in video form, I don't think that's come across. So they sent me review copies of a couple more of their comics, so as I read them, I am hoping to review them and share my thoughts on them with you guys. So the first of these that they sent me is called The Rabbit by Rachael Smith. I was sent it in a PDF copy, so I don't have a handy little book I can show you, but because I am either a professional or just a massive nerd, I printed off the front cover for you to see, because I thought it would be good if you guys could get a sense of what the art style looked like, and I wouldn't know how to describe this, so I thought visual aid, always helpful. Before I jump into my thoughts, I will give you a quick little plot summary, by which I mean I will read the blurb, because that'll be more concise than I ever could be. Eleanor and her younger sister Kathy have run away from school, from home, and from all of their troubles. They may also be running from reality itself, as they seem to have acquired a new friend in the form of a talking cartoon bunny rabbit called Craig. As Craig grows bigger and bigger, the girls soon discover exactly what kind of creature has joined them on their adventure. Running away is not as easy as it seems. Now, to start with, I'm going to say that I absolutely, thoroughly loved reading this. I didn't have any prior expectations going in because I hadn't actually read the blurb, I just started reading the whole thing. But even then, it took me places that I really was not expecting to go. I think one of the reasons why I enjoyed this was that it really manages to walk the line between being quite light and whimsical and also a bit dark and weird. Like the basic premise of they meet a talking cartoon rabbit, I can imagine you're already going, oh, that's a bit different. But then where it goes from there, it just develops in such a fantastic way that I couldn't have predicted, and I really liked the journey that it took me on. Even in the moments where it's getting a bit darker, it still does manage to retain a sort of whimsical nature. And throughout the comic there are quotes from Alice in Wonderland, and I feel like Alice in Wonderland is the perfect comparison point for this, because it's that simultaneous mix of quite whimsical and sort of leaving reality behind, but also it has tinges of darkness to it, and I just really liked the way that it walked that line. I felt it did that really interestingly and well. One of the ways it does this is it sort of switches styles every now and then. That's probably not a very clear way of putting it. So, for example, when the comic starts, you have Eleanor is saving Kathy from, like, a monster. When I first started reading it, the dialogue was a little bit clunky, and I do remember thinking, oh, I hope it's not like this throughout. And it's not, because that's not the story. That's Eleanor and Kathy having a game of pretend. So I automatically liked that, because where I had this initial misgiving of, oh, I don't love the dialogue, it already flipped that, and it was like, that's because it's kids pretending things. And I liked how it transitioned from that to the actual plot, because the little fantasy game they were playing, which they do return to later in the comic, was very bright, and them as figures are quite idealised, insofar as there's not a lot of realistic detail on their faces, that sort of thing, and the text itself is written in sort of a fantasy-esque font. And then when it flips back to the reality, the colours are all a little bit more muted, and their faces are less idealised because they have more detail, more realistic detail of like lines and tiredness and that sort of thing. And the font changes as well. And I just automatically, right from the start, I really enjoyed that change. So although that's a smaller detail, it was one that initially from the very beginning I noticed and I really liked. Another reason why I really enjoyed reading this was I really liked the humour that was present throughout. And quite a lot of the time I think this was done through the visuals rather than necessarily the actual dialogue between the characters. So there's a moment when Eleanor rolls her eyes, but because it's a comic, to show this you have Eleanor's face and you have a little twirly arrow that says eye roll. And it was little details like that that just made me grin. They were peppered throughout, and every time I saw them I was like, oh, I like that. I like that way of doing it. I think my favourite thing about this was I particularly like the way that she lays out her pages. She makes fantastic use of empty space. There's a couple of time transitions where the double page spread is blank pages and then there's one small box of birds flying across the sky, for example. Or there will be a double page spread of the forest at night. Or again, there's a double page spread that's black and white with just 3 birds flying across it in silhouette. And I really liked that way of showing the transition of time and playing around with fitting in frame and what's in frames and what is open. And I find it's quite hard to describe without just holding up a book and being like, see, look at this, this is the example of what I'm talking about. So the majority of the plot and the interaction between the characters takes place in a framed by panels format. But then it is interspersed with these double page spreads and, for example, Alice in Wonderland quotes on double page spreads and this sort of thing. And I think my favourite thing about this was the framing structure that was both narrative and visual at the same time. And I just really liked that. I thought it was a really great way of continuing the story and imparting things and pacing it well. I haven't read that many comics, but I feel like this is potentially the best use of pacing, both visual and narrative, that I have read. You might notice that I haven't talked a lot about the actual rabbit, Craig. That is because I feel like if I started talking about Craig, I would probably get quite spoilery, which I don't want to do. So all I will say is that Craig was unexpected, a little bit weird, but in the best way possible, and I'm not going to say any more so that I don't ruin anything, but I understand why it's called The Rabbit. So I thoroughly enjoyed reading The Rabbit. I thought it was actually excellent. It manages to tell the story of Cathy and Eleanor and what's happened to them, but it doesn't explicitly focus on that. It instead focuses on them finding this rabbit and having this weird adventure with this rabbit. And I thought that was really well done. I loved the pacing, I loved the mix of visual styles that happens throughout it, and essentially I just really, really liked this quite a lot. I will say there are moments that I would describe as almost nightmarish, so if you're looking for a very light thing, whilst this is quite whimsical in ways, it is also a little bit dark in other ways, so if that's not something that you're interested in, then maybe don't read this. But otherwise, I would thoroughly recommend this, and I think Rachael Smith has published another comic with them that I am going to go and buy, I think, because I would really be interested to check out more of her work. So, I hope that I have been able to impart a semi-coherent expression of why I enjoyed this comic so much. Avery Hill have proved themselves to me again to be a very interesting publishing company, so I am definitely looking forward to reading the other things they've sent me, and I hopefully will do videos on them at some point in the future once I've done that. If you've read The Rabbit and also were a bit freaked out about it whilst also thoroughly enjoying it, then do let me know, because I'd love to talk to you about it. So I'm going to go now and probably spend a little bit more time thinking about this comic, because it's sort of stuck in my brain a little bit. But I hope you are having a fantastic day, and I will see you next week for who knows what.